Hello again, everybody. So this is the second video of adjective clauses. The last one, the first one, was an introduction. We looked at the pronouns that we use: who, whom, that, which, whose, when, and where. Remember, whose, when, and where we're going to leave for another video. We're still just with people and things for the nouns we modify. For people is who and that. For things is which and that. The last video, we were looking at using the pronouns who, that, and which as a subject in the adjective clause, right before the verb. It was a subject reference in the first sentence. Now, in this video, we're going to look at the object reference in the second sentence. So to take some notes here, we have again the same five options, the four pronouns and the one option of no pronoun, and they are who, whom, and that. And remember, who, whom, and that are for people. Again, in the first video, the last one, we didn't use any examples with whom. Now we will. So who, whom, and that for people. That and which for things and animals. And as you can see, we have a little color here. Representing subjects, we have three options. Representing the subjects, we have these three options. Who, that, and which. Representing an object in the adjective clause, we have the same three options. Who, that, and which, plus two extra ones, and that's this: whom and no pronoun. So we put a little asterisk right there because whom and no pronoun are only possible when we have an object reference in the second sentence. So for subjects, we have the three options: who, that, and which. For objects, we have the same three possibilities: who, that, and which, plus two more: whom, only for people, and no pronoun for people and things and animals. And again, we're talking about the reference in the second sentence. In the second sentence, if we have a reference and these are one of the pronouns, especially third person, they, he, she, it. These are the three options that we have: who, that, and which. If the reference in the second sentence, and again, that's what this video is about, the reference in the second sentence is an object. These are the respective objects: me, us, you, them, him, her, it. Especially third person: them, him, her, it. Again, we have the same three options: who, that, and which. Who, that, and which. We have the same three options as subjects. But again, with the objects, now we have two other possible combinations. For people, we can use the word whom, which again is basically substituting one of these object pronouns. We can use the word whom for people, or sometimes we just eliminate the pronoun. We have no pronoun for people, things, or animals, and we just represent that with the circle with the line through it, null. So no pronoun. Let's take a look at a couple of options, but again, to take some notes, there's the board with a couple of easy references. One more time. If we have a subject reference, that was the last video, the first video, we have a subject reference, we have those three options: who, that, and which. And again, this is the intention of this video. We're looking in this territory now and looking at these two extra options. We have an object reference in the second sentence: me, us, you, them, him, her, it. We have the same three options: who, that, and which, plus these two: whom or nothing. So let's take a look at a couple of examples, and you'll see. Here we have an object reference. Here we go. And one more time, if you want to pause it and take some notes, right there, there's the board. All right, here we go. Here we go. So, again, we're looking for an object reference in the second sentence. So here we go, like this. Well, the first sentence will have a sentence like this. There's the neighbor. There's the neighbor. We met her yesterday. All right, so in the first sentence, there's the neighbor. Well, there's only one noun that we can modify, and that's the object, because we can't modify. That's like a dummy pronoun. There is. There's the neighbor. So the noun that receives the modification is the noun, the neighbor. When we look in the second sentence, where is the reference to the neighbor? We met her yesterday. So subject, verb, object. There it is right there. So her, which of course is an object, that refers to the neighbor. Now we already know if that's the noun that receives the modification, then the adjective clause must begin right there. So we're not modifying the subject, we're modifying the object, and that means that this first sentence stays exactly the same. We don't split it at all. Stays exactly the same. But now we have an object reference. Remember, in the last video, we were looking at a subject reference. Now we're looking at an object reference. And you know that the object is after that verb, right? Subject, verb, object. So we have an object reference to the noun. Now we have some more possible combinations. And here we go. We know that the first sentence stays the same. So here's the first sentence. There's the neighbor. And of course, there is. Theirs is the contraction. You already know. When do we use contractions in English? Always. That's a simple answer. Always. We always use contractions in English, especially in speech. We've gone over that before in class. I cannot emphasize that enough. Native speakers always use contractions in speech. And in writing too, most of the time we use contractions. Now, I know sometimes they tell you don't use contractions when you write. Why not? That's the way we do it. The only time we don't use contractions is maybe in a very formal document, or if the professor asks you, don't use contractions when you write. Okay, don't use contractions. But again, we always use contractions in English. I tell my students, use contractions when you write, because that's the natural way that English is spoken and written, unless it is, again, a very formal context. Okay, so there's the neighbor. There's the neighbor. Now, watch. We know that the adjective clause, right? We know that the adjective clause has to begin right there. So right there. So there's the object reference, and that's where we're going to use the pronoun to replace her here, right? So we already know the first question we asked, we said, well, the neighbor, is that a person? Yes or no? And the answer is yes, of course. Neighbor is a person. So automatically we have those two options, just like before in the last video, would be this. Our first two options are this. Who and that. Now, because the reference in the second sentence is in the object position, we now have two more options. And we could say this, whom, or we can have no pronoun, because those are functioning as objects. So now comes the rest of the sentence right here. There's the neighbor who we met yesterday. All right, so there's the adjective clause. 4 possible combinations, 4 possible pronouns, well, 3 or no pronoun to introduce the adjective clause. There's the neighbor who we met yesterday. There's the neighbor that we met yesterday. There's the neighbor whom we met yesterday. Or nothing, there's the neighbor we met yesterday. Who would be the most common. No pronoun would probably be the least formal. Whom, the most formal. That is just neutral, it's just right in the middle. So again, there's the neighbor who we met yesterday. Who still is probably the most common. Whom sounds very nice because it's considered to be more formal. Definitely less common. The least common would be whom, but it would be the most formal. And then no pronoun would be considered very, very informal. There's the neighbor we met yesterday. There's the neighbor who we met yesterday. There's the neighbor whom we met yesterday. The whom sounds really nice, like, excuse me, I know English grammar, yeah. It sounds nice, but it is much less common. So again, now we have 4 possible combinations when it is a person and the reference in the second sentence is the object. Now, remember before in the last video, we said that it's not correct to repeat the same pronoun in the adjective clause. Like, you cannot say, I have a friend who he, or I know some people who they. You cannot repeat he or they. It's the same thing, but this one is even more a more common error. Look, remember, you cannot include the object pronoun in the adjective clause here, right? So it is not correct to say this. There's the neighbor who we met her yesterday. That is even a more common error. Be careful with that. You cannot say something like this. Oh, look, there's the new car that I really like it. No, it. Especially it is a very, very common error. You cannot say this. Look, there's the new car that I really like it. No, there's the new car that I really like. There's the new car which I really like. Or no pronoun, there's the new car I really like. But you cannot say, there's the new car that I really like it. That's a very, very common error. Be careful with that. Okay? So here's a first example. Let's do a few more. Let's do one with maybe some things. Or I don't think we have done an example with an animal yet. Let's do one of those. All right. My friend has a dog. My friend has a dog. Now, by the way, I know that we mentioned this before in class. When we talk about animals, we do not use the pronoun it if we know the gender of the animal, and especially if the animal is your pet or any domestic animal. We do not use it. We use he or she or him or her or they or them for all animals. If you have a pet, especially a cat or a dog, right? You love that animal. It has a name. It's part of the family. It just doesn't have any sentiment. Just is like a neutral object. We never use the pronoun it for animals. We use he or she. If we're not sure about the gender of the animal, then we use it. So I will use it in this case just because maybe I'm not sure the gender of my friend's dog. right? So my friend has a dog. I really like it, right? And so in this case, we're modifying the noun dog, and it is the reference to dog, and of course that is in an object position. Now again, if we know the gender of the dog, we know the name of the dog, then it would be like this. It would be him or her. Same concept when we make the combination. We're still replacing one of those pronouns. Right? So my friend has a dog. I really like it. When we have that object reference over here, remember we're going to get one extra option or two. So here comes the adjective clause. It's in the object position. That sentence stays the same. So we know that the adjective clause must begin right there. So for object reference would be this. My friend has a dog, and so now right here, here's where we can introduce the pronoun right there to replace it or him or her. Right? Now, a dog. Step one, you ask yourself this question: a dog, is that a person? No, it's an animal. So automatically we get these two options. We get this: which or that. And because it, him, her. Look, subject, verb, object. Remember, there's our verb. There's our verb right there. So you know that after the verb, you have an object. When we have an object reference in the second sentence, we have an object reference in the second sentence, we know we're going to get another option or two. And in this case, a dog is not a person, so we cannot use whom, but we get this extra option, and that is this: no pronoun. My friend has a dog that I really like. And remember, you cannot include that object reference here. You cannot say, my friend has a dog that I really like it, or my friend has a dog which I really like it, or my friend has a dog I really like it. My friend has a dog that I really like. My friend has a dog which I really like. My friend has a dog I really like. But you must eliminate the pronoun reference in the adjective clause. That's a big no-no. You got to be careful with that. It's a very, very common error. So again, we have an object reference that gives us one extra option here, and that is no pronoun. Now, we just did a couple of examples where, again, just like in the first video, we started off with the first couple of examples modifying the object. But you can also modify the subject in the adjective clause. And in that case, we're going to split that first sentence. All right, let's do an example where we're modifying some subjects with an object reference. And I know guys, sometimes it sounds complicated, but it's not complicated. It's going to be a natural process. You're not going to think, well, I have two sentences and I'm going to combine them and the second sentence is going to become the adjective clause modifying the noun. No, come on. This is going to become a natural, spontaneous form of expression. We're looking at it here grammatically and looking at the pieces, but it's really not that complicated. Let's do another example. Let's do another example like this. Ready? So let's do this one. The waiter was great. The waiter was great. We had him last night. The waiter was great We had him last night. All right, so we have two sentences. We know that the second sentence becomes the adjective clause and it modifies a noun in the first sentence. In this case, the waiter was great, subject, verb, but we don't have a direct object, we have an adjective. We cannot modify an adjective. We have to modify the noun. Remember, adjectives modify nouns. And a clause is a group of words with a subject and a verb. So an adjective clause is that group of words with a subject and a verb that modify a noun. And that's what the second sentence becomes the adjective clause. So we know that the waiter is the noun that receives the modification. Then we know we're going to have to split that first sentence right there between the subject and the verb. Now, the second sentence, we had him last night. Where is the reference to the waiter? Right here, him. And we know that that is an object because it's after the verb. Right there, subject, verb, object. So, again, the reference in the second sentence is an object right here, and that object, him, that refers to the waiter. So, we're going to have, for this sentence, 4 possible options. Because the waiter is a person, automatically we get this, who and that. And then the 2 extra options are going to be whom or nothing, no pronoun. So here we go. We start off with the subject right here, right? And that's this. The waiter. Now we have to split that sentence. So we know right here now is where we're going to have the pronouns that introduce the adjective clause. So, step 1, the waiter. Is that a person? No. Is that a person? Yes, it's not a thing. So automatically, we're going to have this. Who and that. Now comes the rest of that sentence. The waiter who we had last night. Now comes the rest of the first sentence, starting with the verb, of course, was great. So, the most common would just be this. The waiter who we had last night was great. But because we have that object reference in the second sentence, we have those two extra options. And those 2 extra options are this. Whom or nothing, no pronoun. So again, those are the 4 possible options for that sentence. The waiter who we had last night was great. The waiter that we had last night was great. The waiter whom we had last night was great. Or no pronoun, the waiter we had last night was great. And again, who is probably the most common, the most high frequency. Whom would be the least common but the most formal. And no pronoun would be the least formal. A very informal context. The waiter we had last night was great. More formal and probably a little more common. The waiter who we had last night was great. You want to be like, give me. The waiter whom we had last night was great. So again, most common, probably the most formal, probably the least common, and that just kind of right in the middle, like neutral. Okay? So we have again there an object reference modifying a subject, and this would be probably the least common combination of an adjective clause. But there we have, guys, the 4 possible combinations of adjective clauses where we have a subject reference in the first sentence. That was the first video. Subject reference in the first sentence, modifying the subject or the object. And then, that's 2. And then this one, we have an object reference in the second sentence, modifying the subject or the object. Let's do one more example with an object here. Let's see, something like this. Let's see. The laptop is cheap. Jason wants it. We'll have a very, very short sentence here, okay? The laptop is cheap. Jason wants it. In the first sentence, again, there's only one noun that we see here to modify, and that's the subject. So that's right here. It's the laptop. So we know then that first sentence we have to split it right there, and then Jason wants it. Subject, verb, object. So we know that it is the object reference, and it is referring to the laptop. So it's a very easy combination, and again, that would be right here. Start off the first sentence. Is this the laptop? Now, right there, that stop. The adjective clause pronoun needs to be introduced right here. And remember, in this case, it is an object. The laptop, is that a person? No. So we have those first two options, which or that, and because the reference in the second sentence is in the object position, and that's right there after the subject, verb, object, now we know we have that option of no pronoun, nothing. And so that would be right here represented by that circle with the line through it, and that would be the laptop the laptop that Jason wants. Now comes the rest of the first sentence right here. Is cheap. The laptop which Jason wants is cheap. The laptop that Jason wants is cheap. Or no pronoun, the laptop Jason wants is cheap. And again, for things, we're modifying a laptop, that's a thing. We always have those two options, that or which. Which, the more formal but less common option. That, the most common but less formal option. And then sometimes no pronoun, and that is a very informal option. The laptop Jason wants is cheap. Guys, listen to me now. Again, a very common error is this. Non-native speakers will make this error. They'll say this: the laptop that Jason wants it is cheap. Remember, right here, right here, you cannot have the pronoun it. You cannot put it again right there. Never. That's the intention of making the combination. When we make that combination, the second sentence becomes the adjective clause, and we must eliminate the pronoun reference it or him or her or them. That's the intention of making the combination. We eliminate that pronoun in the second sentence. It is represented here with which or that or no pronoun. So again, which or that or no pronoun, those represent the object it here. You cannot include it in the adjective clause. And so one more time, this part right here, this part right here, which Jason wants, Now remember, it stops right there. Which Jason wants, that becomes the adjective clause. Okay? So there we have we're about 30 minutes now into this video. This was an example of adjective clause pronouns in the object position. Now, let's do a few more minutes with another object reference that's less common, and that's when we have what we call a phrasal verb or a verb preposition combination in the second sentence. Let's do a quick example of that. That's less common, and it also gives us one more possible option. Watch. Sometimes we'll have what we call this. We'll have like this: a verb plus a verb plus a preposition combination. So we like green for our verbs, and we like red for our prepositions today. And so these would be some common verb preposition combinations. Something like this. Speak with, or talk to, or look at, or look for, or listen to. So of course, here's the verb: speak, talk, look, or listen. And here's the preposition: with, to, at, for, to. These are some very common verb preposition combinations. There are many, many others. As a matter of fact, phrasal verbs are a very unique component of the English verb system. And a phrasal verb is when we have a verb preposition combination, but it changes the meaning of the verb completely. So, for example, the verb turn, or you're driving, turn right, turn left. Well, if we change the preposition, turn up means to increase in volume or intensity. Turn up can also mean to appear. Turn down can mean to decrease in volume or intensity, or turn down also can mean to reject. Turn over, turn around, turn into. There are many combinations with many different verbs, and just because you know what the verb means and you know what the preposition means, together they form a unique combination with a completely different meaning. That's a different lesson. We'll talk about phrasal verbs some more in class. But for now, I want you to imagine this. It's possible in the second sentence that becomes the adjective clause, it's possible to have a verb preposition combination. Speak with, talk to, look at, listen to, etc. Let's use a couple of these as an example, and you'll see that we have one more possible combination, and that is everything the same, but sometimes in a very formal context, we can use the preposition to introduce the adjective clause, and then we have only one possibility, and that's very, very formal. Let's take a look. All right? So an example might be something like this. Let's do, we'll make one that's a question. We haven't done any questions yet. So we'll make one that's a question like this. What's that song? What's that song? And then the second sentence will be, you're listening to it. Okay, well, here's the verb preposition combination right there. Is listening to. Listening to. What's that song? You're listening to it. Well, obviously, the second sentence, you're listening to it. It is referring to that song. So, song, that's the noun. That's the noun that receives the modification. Here's the reference, and we know that it is in the object position, and it is referring to that song. So, in this case, the first sentence stays the same, and the whole thing now will become a question. And so it would be like this. What's that song? Okay, so we already know if this is the noun that receives the modification, the adjective clause must begin right here. So right here is where that object, right, it becomes the pronoun that we use to introduce the adjective clause. Song, it's not a person, it's a thing, so automatically we get those first two options that are this, which, or that. And again, just like we have seen in this video, when we have the reference in the object position, that's when it's also possible to have no pronoun. No pronoun. So, what's that song that you're listening to? Now, guys, look, you need to maintain that verb preposition combination right there. You cannot eliminate that preposition. That would sometimes actually impede the meaning and the understanding of the sentence. If you said this, what's that song that you're listening? Like this, what's that song that you're listening? People might be, huh? What do you mean? That I'm listening to? The preposition is everything. You cannot eliminate the preposition. What you eliminate is right here, the pronoun it. You cannot say, what's that song that you're listening to? It. No. Remember, it is represented. It, right here, it is represented by which or that or nothing. It doesn't go there. Okay? So, again, which, the most formal but the least common. That, the most common but less formal. And in this case, because we have the reference in the object position, then no pronoun is possible, and that's very informal. And that would be this. What's that song you're listening to? What's that song you're listening to? What's that song that you're listening to? What's that song you're listening to? What's that song you're listening to? That's not a real formal context. We would never say, what's that song which you're listening to? It just sounds a little weird. And you probably feel the same way. You're probably like, yeah, I never heard that before, because it's not high frequency. Remember, which is going to be a much more formal context. Okay? So, what's that song that you're listening to? Or what's that song you're listening to? These would be more common, and which would be much less common, but a lot more formal. Now, because we have this verb preposition combination, that gives us one more possible option, and it is very formal, and that is this. We can use the preposition to introduce the adjective clause, and in that case, we can only use which, and that would be like this. What's that song? And so now what would happen is we're going to use right there the preposition, and then right here the pronoun, and that would be this. What's that song to which you're listening? Now, in this case, what you're doing is you're just using that preposition to introduce the adjective clause. There's the verb. Guys, this right here, what's that song to which you're listening? That would be a very, very formal context. It's not common to hear that, especially, around here where there's a lot of non-native speakers. That would just be a very rare combination to hear. But in that case, when we have a verb preposition combination, that preposition can give you that one extra option. Again, if you use this combination, you have only one option. So right here, when you have that introducing the adjective clause, if you have right here the preposition, you have only one option here. When this is a thing, you have only one option here, and that is the word which. sounds really nice in the right context, okay? Let's take a look at another example, and let's do one with a person or people, and we'll see that combination, okay? So there's the board if you want to take some notes there, pause it and take some notes. Let's do one more now with a person, and we'll also do another question just to have a. Well, on a quest, we'll do another question because we didn't do any the last time, and that'll be this. Who's that guy? Who's that guy? You were talking to him. Who's that guy? You were talking to him. Well, here's the verb, talk, and then here's that preposition to. So there's our verb preposition combination, talking to. Here's the noun that receives the modification is guy. So we know that the adjective clause is going to start right there. And then there's the reference, and we know that him, well, that is an object, and him is referring to the noun guy. So the adjective clause, in this case, we have 5 possible combinations. The standard 4, like we did before, who, that, whom, and nothing. Then the one we're using the preposition to introduce the adjective clause. So it would be like this. Oops, this marker is almost done. Who's that guy? And so now we know that the adjective clause has to begin right here. So this is going to be where we use the pronouns. Remember, substituting the object right there. And so these would be our 4 possible options here would be this. Who is 1, right? Or whom is 2. That is 3. And no pronoun is 4. Who's that guy who you were talking to? And again, guys, there is our here's our verb preposition combination right there. Talking to. Who's that guy you were talking to? It's going to get 4 possibilities. Who's that guy who you were talking to? Who's that guy whom you were talking to? Who's that guy that you were talking to, or no pronoun? Who's that guy you were talking to? Again, probably the most common would be who, the most formal whom, and then the least formal no pronoun, and that just right in the middle, kind of neutral. Who's that guy that you were talking to? All are synonymous. They do not change the meaning. The only difference is formality and frequency. That's it. Now, again, when we have that verb preposition combination, that preposition gives us one more possible option, and that would be this. So the same first part of the sentence like this, right? Who's that guy? Now we can use here the preposition and then the pronoun right here, but there's only going to be one possible combination here. The rest of the sentence will say, who's that guy? So here comes the preposition is to. As the object of the preposition, the only option we have here now is whom. It cannot be who or that or no pronoun. Only whom. Just like the last example, when it's a thing or an animal, only which. When it's a person and the preposition introduces the adjective clause, it can only be who. So it's like this. Who's that guy to whom you were talking? And so again, there's that verb. This is the only way we can separate the verb preposition. And again, when we have right here, when we have a preposition, then and that's a person, person, and then we're using that preposition to introduce the adjective clause. You have only right here, you only have this, you only have one option, and that is whom. Now again, this is a very formal combination that is much less common, especially in speech, and a native speaker would probably not say, who's that guy to whom you were talking? It just sounds very, very formal, like really almost out of context. This situation is not very formal. Okay, so now we have, when it's a person and we have a verb preposition combination, we now have 5 possible options for the adjective clause. Who's that guy who you were talking to? Who's that guy whom you were talking to? Who's that guy that you were talking to? Who's that guy you were talking to? Who's that guy to whom you were talking? But remember, the one thing that you really need to be careful with, do not include the pronoun reference when you make the adjective clause. You cannot say, who's that guy who you were talking to him? Remember, the intention when we make the combination is to eliminate the pronoun reference in the adjective clause. Okay? So, well over 40 minutes, guys, in this video, coming up on almost an hour. There's a lot more. We're going to have some more videos on this chapter. Again, if it's the black book, it's chapter 12, adjective clauses. If it's the blue book, it's chapter 13. And the blue book is a little bit more extensive. There are some parts, for example, punctuating the adjective clause, that we get into in the blue book in the levels 5 and 6, and levels 3 and 4, that's not included. We have not done any punctuation yet. We have not done any commas. That's coming. We still need to do whose, the possession. We need to do where for the location, and when for the noun of time. So there's probably going to be 2, maybe even 3 more videos on this chapter. Okay? So thank you, and let's look forward to the next video on adjective clauses.